we have unmuted. Yes, so yeah. Okay. We'll officially start this event with a 15-second silent prayer. Yes, welcome to all the participants who have come here, to all friends, UPSC aspirants, and wonderful listeners who are all assembled here to hear the speech of our great sir and friendly interaction with Satish Balakrishnan sir. We would like you all to take this as such an moment to cherish throughout in your life, and please do take full use of it. I would like to call upon Shiva Shanmugam, our treasurer, to give a intro speech. Shiva Shanmugam. Shiva Shanmugam, are you there? Hello? Yes, I think Shiva Shanmugam is not available. Okay, I'll do. Yes, guys. Again, I'm saying welcome all. This is such a moment where you can interact with an great thinker, a speaker, as told by our head of digital affairs, Anup Das, who has interacted with him, and he is here for us, sparing his in his free time to provide us with such a knowledge, which we are gonna love it and we are gonna take it back. And sure, I think this to us is gonna be a great time for us to know a lot of things. And yes, I would like to call upon Director Adil to give a introduction about our guest today. Adil, you can go. Oh, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second. Yeah. Yes, Adil, you can.
Yeah, okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm honored to introduce the guest for today's occasion, Mr. Satish Balakrishnan IFS, Indian Embassy, Egypt. He was born in Kannur district of Kerala. He graduated with a M.Tech degree in aeronautical engineering from the prestigious IIT Kanpur before joining Airbus and later L&T. He is also known for his stint as an enthusiastic civil service teacher who served in multiple civil service coaching institutions like um, uh, Amrita Civil Service Coaching Center. He passed 2018 UPSC exams with an excellent performance and bagged All India rank of 125. He had his foundation course in LBS and in NAA. Currently, he is serving as the second secretary in Indian Embassy in Egypt. He is young, energetic, and a very cool and friendly person who is always ready to help the next generation move closer towards their dream of being a civil servant. Thank you. Thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you, Adil, for that wonderful intro about our guest. Yes, sir. Satish Balakrishnan, sir. The stage is all yours. We are happy. Yes, sir. You can.
Thank you, guys. I mean, you were talking a lot about Satish Balakrishnan. So for a moment, I was confused. Are you talking about me or somebody else? Because too many adjectives, too many good things. I'm not used to those. But one thing I'll suggest is I would like everyone to mute, but I would want everyone to keep the videos on. I mean, as much as possible, because it is always good to interact with faces rather than static elements.
Yes, sir. Sir, just wanted to add one thing, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, 1 second. Yeah, sir. So regarding like we have a lot of participants, so we have jotted down certain questions from them, and I'll be asking the questions like in behalf of the participants. And once that questions are over, and if in case like questions are some questions extras are there, participants will talk. So I just wanted to inform you this.
Okay,
You
great.
can
And
continue.
even in the middle of a discussion or something, if any of the participants have some very substantive question or a doubt, I mean, they can raise a hand, they can put the question in the chat, and if you feel we can go ahead with that. So yes, I mean,
Yes.
I guess we can go ahead with the questions. And how do you want? I mean, do you want me to talk for a moment and then start with the questions, or let us go directly with the questions? Whatever you guys want to do it.
You you can just give a small like we have all given an intro from our perspective, sir. How
Okay.
about you saying about yourself? Yeah, yes. Sir.
See, it's very simple. I mean, for me, this was not like okay, I never had a dream of like, okay, I will be a civil servant at this particular age. No, it just came to me just like that. The first time when I really thought about it very seriously, I was like 26 years old. I was working in the corporates. Then I have been into multiple corporates. I was very happy with my corporate life because I was completely doing the things which I have my academic background in as well. It was completely in aerospace engineering, research and development. And I was pretty happy with the corporate culture, with my work nature, everything. But then, I mean, this idea just came into my mind, and that's how it began. I mean, when it came to my mind, I started thinking, okay, why not? I like my work. Doesn't mean that I cannot like something else, right? So that is how I started thinking about it seriously. In 2016, I gave my first serious attempt, but I mean, I gave my interview, but finally I missed the final selection by 1 mark. And again in 2017, I gave my second serious attempt. I mean, yeah, things went. The probability, the luck was on my side, so things went pretty well. So this is a very brief background of my journey. And the time that I was preparing, I was mostly, I mean, at 26, when you start preparing something, when you start something totally fresh, it is not possible for many of us to sit and study, because I mean, we are past that particular age when you can sit down and study, attend a class and study. I mean, no, that's not the I mean, that was not very something with which I was very comfortable with. So that is why I thought, okay, why not? I will teach something. And in the process, I mean, the teaching itself was my mode of preparation as well. So I was teaching in multiple academies, like Adil was telling. I was there a part of Kerala State Civil Service Academy. I was in Amrita. I was in Pala. So particularly in the from the southern Kerala region, I mean, I have been associated with 5 or 6 different academies. And in many of these academies, I was taking totally different subjects, totally different papers. So in a way, my mode of preparation was teaching itself rather than me sitting down in a chair and studying the books one by one. I mean, my mode of preparation was teaching, interacting with the aspirants. I mean, that's why I said in the beginning itself, it's an interaction. I take a lot of things from you. I give you something which I have in my mind. So that's how I like it. And that's what I'm doing right now as well. So feel free to ask me whatever doubts and queries that you have in your mind, because what I have felt is that the UPSC preparation is a very unique journey. And that journey is very specific to the aspirants. Every aspirant will have their own journeys. Uh, so it is a very unique opportunity for you to study a lot of things which otherwise you are not used to. Think a lot of new things which otherwise you wouldn't have thought about, and inculcate and develop a lot of qualities which otherwise you may not really have an opportunity for. So embrace it and don't really bother about what will be the outcome. Definitely, yes, we are all concerned about the outcome, but the outcome should not be the only reason for which you are preparing. I mean, the preparation itself should be a reason. It's like how we tell about education. Is education all about getting a job? Is education a means or an end in itself? I have always believed that the education has an end in itself as well, because you don't have to consider education just as a means to get a job. If getting a job is the only purpose of education, that defies, that fails that purpose itself. So the UPSC preparation is also like that. Consider it as a journey where you will get an opportunity to interact with a lot of wonderful aspirants like you, learn a lot of things from them, get a lot of diverse viewpoints, develop a very wide umbrella perspectives on a lot of diverse topics. And yes, in the process, you might even end up succeeding in the examination also, which is good. Otherwise, as a job, the job that I'm doing is just as similar as any other job in this planet. It's not different. Well, looking from outside, you might think that it is quite, what can I say? There's a lot of so-called image associated with it. There is a lot of so-called glory associated with it, a lot of limelight. But once you are inside, it's just the same as every other job. So that's my introduction into the whole domain. Now you may ask your questions, your queries, and I will go with the flow.
Yes, sir. Your way of explanation was totally different than how we even expected it, sir. That was like in a different perspective of whatever we have thinking about how to prepare for an UPSC examination. Thank you for that, sir. I'll be asking you the questions like what some of our participants have given. And yes, we are expecting you to answer it, sir. And yes, I'm moving on to the questions. Okay, so the first question will be how, they have participants have asked you to suggest some study material and institution to study, if any, like you would prefer.
The institutions to study, I will not suggest anything, because for one, I'm not a brand ambassador of any of the institutions. Even the institutions where I was previously teaching, I will not recommend any of them to anybody, because identification of an ideal academy is a very individual thing. Like, how do I decide that, okay, this is my favorite food? I tell that this is my favorite food because I have tried and I have tasted it. So you will have to, the aspirant will have to talk with the people who are running that academy. They will have to compare. I mean, does the value systems, does the teaching methodology of that particular academy, is that kind of teaching what I want? If that is what I want, yes, then that is the academy which I'm choosing. It is not like a one size fit all condition. It is exactly the same with study materials as well. Imagine like 15 years back, when internet wasn't very easily available and accessible right now, like now. We used to have very limited study materials, right? Because it was all from specific books. You'll have to go to the library, get that books, get that materials. But now with the internet, the problem is that you have like literally unlimited study materials. And now it is very important to weed out the study materials. I mean, this is not what I want. So that weeding process, that removal process is more important than the choosing process. Because if you don't weed out the unnecessary materials, at the end of the day, you will be having like 1 terabyte of study materials for UPSC. How are you going to study all these things? How are you going to revise all these things? So it is very important that you pick and choose your materials. In my opinion, the best strategy should be you pick 1 or 2 standard textbooks for a material. For example, I mean, take the case of history for that matter. In history, you choose like, I mean, again, you classify history into ancient, medieval, and modern. Now for ancient, which is the book that you want to put? For medieval, again, which is the book? And for modern, which is the book? So 1 book for 1 topic. So this book should be your kind of textbook. So this is the book from where you are taking your concepts. This is the book which you are revising. This is the book to which you are going to solve your doubts, your confusions for revisions, etc. Now you have only 1 book. That means you can cover that book. You can revise that book. You will have sufficient time, because time is a major constraint for you people. Everyone have just 24 hours. All of us have just 24 hours. And can in a 24-hour time period, how many hours can you study? How many hours can you dedicate towards preparation? And that too in a sustainable fashion. It's not like today you spend 15 hours and for next 1 week, you don't study anything at all. No, it doesn't work like that. So ideally, how much time you can spend? If you ask me, I mean, I have seen many people who tell that, okay, every day you will have to study like 10 hours, minimum 10 hours, minimum 12 hours, minimum 15 hours. Believe me, this is all just bullshit. You are a human being. You need to study, yes. But more importantly, you need to have your sleep. You need to have your rest. You need to have your food. You need to have your family time. You need to have your social time. You need to have time with your friends. You need to inculcate some idea, what I call as me time. That is, you need to spend time on your hobbies, your interests, maybe dance, music, sports, gym, whatever you call it. And ultimately, you need to keep in mind that you are preparing for civil service. You cannot prepare for civil service by isolating yourself from the civil society. You will have to be the part of the civil society. You will have to learn from the civil society. So how can you learn from the civil society? How can you know the problems of the civil society if you are not part of that society? So you cannot just shut yourself away from the society. You cannot just isolate yourself in a room and study. No, that is not how you prepare for this exam. So that is why you will have to have your social life. You will have to have your civil life, your family life, your personal life. Everything should be there along with your preparation. So now you think sustainably, how much time can you allocate for your studies? 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours maximum? This is what I think is practical. I mean, again, it's a very, very personal opinion from me. Whatever I say is completely my personal opinion. You may be a person who can study up to 15 hours every day. Well and good. But I cannot. I was not able to. So whatever I say is completely my personal opinion. So that is why I say, with a limited amount of time in your hand, your choice of study materials should also be very, very selective. It can be anything. You can pick and choose. I mean, for example, if you're taking modern history, I have friends who have chosen Ramachandra Guha. I have friends who have chosen, various other authors. So it's completely up to you to decide which material that you want to choose. But in my opinion, you shouldn't have more than one textbook or one important reference material, because that textbook or that reference material should be the one to which you will go every time. But you can have, you can pick and choose. For example, for one particular topic, okay, you realize that, okay, this article seems pretty good. This article you may take from a magazine, from a particular reference book, from the open media, newspapers, anywhere. So read everything. You can read any number of materials. But when it comes to studying something, keep one, maximum two. This is my suggestion. Okay. So this is regarding the query on study materials and institution.
Thank you, sir. You just summed up like too many cooks boil a broth in a more elaborate
Exactly.
way, better than ever, sir. Yes, sir.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's very true.
Thank
Because
you. And to the next,
it's practically impossible to do more than, too many books and too many resources. Yeah.
Over to the next question, sir. Sir, through your bio, we got to know that you were working in L&T and also another one more organization. Like, how did you get that time to prepare in between? And did you have that break time or something like in between? Like, there will be over stressful work life as well as you have to study. You have already mentioned it, but still, how did you manage it?
I couldn't manage. Frankly speaking, I couldn't manage. In 2015 December, I resigned from my corporate life completely. I gave my first attempt. I previously said that I gave my first serious attempt in 2016. But before that, in 2015, I gave my first attempt. I couldn't clear the prelims. So that is why I finally decided that, okay, I'm not able to balance my work and my preparation, and hence I had to put my papers. And particularly, yes, again, it depends upon your work culture. The nature of your work, the responsibilities that you're handling. So if you think that you are a part of an organization where you have sufficient flexibility in time, if you think that you have sufficient, what can I say, the leeways to optimize your preparation process, without sacrificing your responsibilities, without compromising on your responsibilities, then yes, the person should be able to go hand in hand with the job and the preparation. But If you feel that, okay, your responsibilities are more demanding, if you feel that you may not be able to go hand in hand with both the office and or your job and your preparation, then yes, you might have to take a call. I mean, do you want to continue with your job, or do you want to quit it and go for the preparation? I mean, again, quitting is not a very easy thing. I mean, it's a very difficult process. I completely understand that, because the more you think about quitting, you will be bombarded with all these ideas, from sometimes from your family, sometimes from the extended family, sometimes from the friends. A lot of people will ask you, I mean, you have a very stable job, a well-paid job, you have career security. Why do you want to just throw it all away? And that's a very dangerous question, because then you will start understanding that, okay, I'm throwing away the stability which I have for something which I don't even know if I will get. And the only way you can really answer that question, you will have to sit down, you will have to really think, and think not from the perspective at the point, but think also like 5 years down the line. When 5 years or 10 years down the line, when you think back on your past, will you feel regret? Will I regret about not quitting the job and not giving a proper preparation? If you feel that you are going to regret that your entire life, then yes, I think that you should quit and give it a try. But for a lot of people, I mean, this is like, okay, I'll just give it a try kind of thing. It's not that important. It's not that kind of a dream, or that strong a desire for that matter. It is just like, okay, today I'm having idli, or today I'm having dosa kind of thing. I mean, if not dosa, I'm happy with idli as well. Or if not idli, I can have puri as well. If that kind of an option is what civil service is for you, then I mean, I will say you have more options. You need not quit. But if you really think that if you don't quit right now, you're going to regret it 5 years down the line, then probably yes, you might have to quit. So it completely depends upon the person's ability to balance both job and preparation, the nature of the job, the responsibilities, the time that your job demands from you, and ultimately at the end of like 8 or 10 hours of job, do you still have the energy level to prepare? Do you still have the energy level to come home and do a committed preparation, a sustainable preparation? Like I said previously, not for one day, but for the entire days, all the days that you are preparing. So that should be an ideal way of thinking about it, I think.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that answer, sir. And yes, the next question seems to be a follow-up question for the previous one. So, as you mentioned about backups, like, should we have a backup plan in case of we don't qualify? What do you suggest as a backup plan? If I don't get into UPSC, what government in case like jobs or something which I can keep as a backup plan?
Like if you are specifically asking for backup plans in the case of civil service examination itself, I mean, UPSC conducts a lot of other examination. I mean, if you just go through the website of UPSC, you will find that it is not just the civil service examination, but you have for including for the armed forces, the CAPF, Delhi police. So a lot of exams are being conducted by UPSC. And if you feel that you have given a decent effort with the civil service examination, then definitely you will be able to fare in all other examinations as well. And if you see a good number of people who are clearing the other examination are those who have in fact prepared for civil service examination. I mean, I'm telling this from the experience which I have from a lot of my friends actually. A lot of my friends with whom I used to prepare, I mean, they were not able to really clear the civil service examination, but a good number of them got into other examinations which were conducted by UPSC. And again, the state PSCs are also a very good opportunity. It's a different kind of examination, yes, but still the kind of information that you have gathered in the process of UPSC preparation, that will definitely help you in the state PSCs as well. And more importantly, what I feel is that once you take up the UPSC preparation, you start realizing that there are a lot of subjects which you like. Until now, you may be an engineer, or you may be a doctor, or you may be you may be having a degree in arts, but during the course of UPSC preparation, the civil service exam preparation, you realize that, okay, I like history as well, I like philosophy, or some of you might start developing an interest towards public administration. So a lot of options, you start realizing that you're having a lot of other options as well. You start realizing that more doors are opening in front of you. I have a lot of my friends who realize that think tanks are what they want to associate with. A lot of them who have developed an interest in international relations. Some of them are now associated with international think tanks. Some of them who started having an affiliation towards the subjects like public administration, social causes, etc. Some of them have started their own NGOs. So the preparation process, if you really did the preparation process in a committed fashion, you will start realizing that a lot of other doors and opportunities are there in front of you. So don't really bother yourself about what if not kind of questions. What if you don't clear the UPSC? You still have a lot of other options, a lot of other doors will open in front of you, and you will start realizing that you have fallen in love with a lot of different subjects. And you may be in a position to completely shift your domain. I mean, you may be an engineer academically until yesterday, but through your UPSC preparation, you might start realizing that, okay, I'm in love with psychology. Let me do higher studies in psychology. You might end up as a psychologist, you might, or a philosopher. I mean, you might be part of think tanks, you might be a writer. I mean, it can be a number of options. Does that clear the question in certain ways? Does that give the people a kind of relief? Hello.
Yeah, sir, we understood it clearly, sir.
Okay.
Thank you for your explanation. You keep it simple, everything, sir. You just not complicate everything, and you keep it simple, everything.
Because these were the things which I talked with myself during my preparation time. So a lot of these questions which you are having now, I had them all during my preparation time as well. So a lot of things that I'm telling to you now is exactly the same thing which I used to talk with me.
Yeah, sir, you just don't complicate and keep it simple as. And here is our next question, sir. How to manage with civil services preparation during our hectic postgraduate days? If I'm studying if I'm doing an MBA or any other postgraduate, as you have also done a postgraduate, how do you manage? Or as you said, like I have not studied anything regarding UPSC in my college or days, I think so. So how we can manage in? You can give us some of your ideas.
I guess it is completely about prioritization, because see, when you are doing your MTech or in the process of thesis, your highest priority is definitely for your thesis, right? Because you have invested a lot of your time, you have invested a lot of your effort already into it. And even after completing your thesis and everything, you can still do the UPSC preparation. But when you are doing your thesis, or when you are at the verge of finishing your examinations, I guess the highest priority will be for that thing. So, I mean, again, it completely depends upon the idea of prioritization. Because when you prioritize, you can exactly pick and choose, okay, this is what I'm giving the highest priority for. Now, imagine you are going for a buffet. You go to a buffet, you have like hundreds of items in front of you. Which one would you choose? You will choose the one which is most important for you, right? You go to a bookstall, which book would you choose? There are like thousands of books. You will go and choose a book which you want the most at that point of time. So that is exactly the same with how prioritization happens. Even subconsciously or even unconsciously, we are all prioritizing. But now when it comes to the preparation point of view, when you have multiple things in your hand, The same prioritization, you will have to do it more consciously. You will have to weigh how much time that you have to spend for your thesis or for your preparation or for your anything basically. So it is that kind of a prioritization that you should be able to do more consciously. What I suggest is sit down and write down your thoughts in a piece of paper, because otherwise what happens is that a lot of things are there in your mind. In your mind you will be thinking, okay, I have that assignment to be submitted next week, and then the thesis, the first submission for the thesis. So a lot of things are there in your mind, but in mind what happens is that with all these thoughts, they get cluttered. A lot of things are going entangling with each other. One wire is going this side, the other is going on this side. It would be like the like our electricity board basically. I mean, with all these wires going in all directions, I mean, it's completely unorganized. So now instead of that, you write it down in a piece of paper. You will start having more clarity. Okay, this is the time frame. This is the time frame for the next thing. Okay, in the middle of that, I have this much time which I can use as a free time. Okay, a part of that free time I can devote for the preparation. So that kind of a allocation process, that kind of a division process has to be done with regard to how much time you have, how much free time you have, and out of that free time, how much you can devote to UPSC preparation. Because like I said, I mean, the preparation, the studies, they are just one part of your life. You are a human being, which means you have a social life, you have a civil life, you have time, you should have time for your friends, you should have time for your family, you should have time for yourself. So all these things should also be there. The studies, the preparation, they should not consume the entire 24 hours that you have. And that is very important for you to evolve into a proper human being. So this is what I can suggest with respect to the time balance, or managing your time when it comes to UPSC preparation versus job versus thesis versus other studies, post-graduation, whatever it be.
Thank you, sir. I'm back. Sorry, I had a network difficulty. I
It's
came
okay.
back, sir. I'll move on to the next question. So, sir, there is a question regarding like, could you explain all the procedures after passing all the tests? Like, how was your training for as an IFS officer different from like other officers as such? If you can share with it, it will be good, sir.
See, particularly for the I mean, for the foreign service, I mean, like who said? I guess Adil said that I had like 3 months in LBSNA. The LBSNA is what we call as a foundation course. The foundation course is compulsory for everyone who clears the examination. And for foundation course, India right now in India, I guess there are like 3 different academies. One of them being LBSNA, and generally all the foreign service and administrative service candidates who clear the examination and who get into these services, they have their foundation course in LBSNA. And after 3 months of LBSNA, for the foreign service, we have a foreign service academy or foreign service institute in Delhi. So I have spent like 6 months in Foreign Service Institute, FSI. And after that, I mean, I have chosen my language. I mean, in foreign service, again, you have to choose a compulsory foreign language. So I have chosen Arabic, and for Arabic, the center of learning is Egypt. So that's how I have come to Egypt. So I spent 1.5 years initially here as a language training. I was attending classes in a university, proper university, academically, and at the same time I was having my responsibilities in the embassy as well. And after that, I mean, we apply for our next posting. My friends who came here along with me for the Arabic language training, they have now moved to different missions, but I have chosen to continue here. So that is why I'm still in Egypt. So this is a rough overlook of
So
how
nice,
the
yes.
evolution of a foreign service official is like.
Sir, a personal question. How many languages do you know, sir?
I mean, the foreign languages which I know is basically just English and a little bit of Arabic. That's it. I tried learning a little bit of Spanish on my own, a little bit, and a little bit of French as well, but I'm sure that I might have forgotten both of them. So as of now, I know I'm very comfortable with English, and with Arabic, I am keeping my baby steps.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that, sir. And yes, and the next question is regarding your interview experience, sir. Like, how was your interview experience as such when they are interviewing you?
In my personal viewpoint, interview is the best part of the whole examination process, because imagine yourself as a candidate who is attending the prelims examination. You have a question, you have 4 choices in front of you. Either you know it or you don't know it. Definitely, yes, you can take a blind guess as well, even that might work. But otherwise, it's like a very black and white thing. Either you know or you don't know. And like I said, it's a very black and white thing, meaning you do not have much options. There is nothing like, okay, elaborating yourself. There is no option for asking for a clarification, right? But now you go to the next stage. In the mains examination, okay, you have a little bit more of freedom here. The question, yes, you may not know the answer of that question completely, but still you can manage to explain yourself. You can still manage to give your viewpoint. Now you go to the interview, which is the third level, which is a very much like a personal communication. Imagine I'm not understanding your question. I ask for a clarification. Did you mean this? And exactly, if I'm telling something and if you guys are not understanding me, you can ask me for a clarification, right? So that is very important in a communication process. That is to have the right question and to have the right answer. Otherwise, I will be answering to a question which is not really the intention, and I might be giving an answer which is something that you never wanted to hear in the first place. You might be actually looking for an answer for another question. So the communication process happens at its best in the interview, and it's a very comfortable thing as well, because the people in front of you, they are there to select you at the end of the day, because the prelims and the mains are effectively rejection process, but interview is like a selection process. So they are there to select you, meaning they are there to find the best out of you. They will try their best to make you feel comfortable. They will be genuinely very supportive, unless you are very much inclined in digging your own pit. If you get into an argument, if you start giving a feeling to the interview panel that, okay, this guy is too argumentative, or if this guy is too adamant, or if this guy is too irrational, yes, you are limiting your chances in that case. But otherwise, if at the end of the interview, if you feel happy, the chances are that the other person might also be happy. It will be exactly like an interpersonal communication between two people. Or imagine two friends. You meet an old friend, you talk with a while, and at the end of the conversation, if you feel happy, the chances are that your friend is also happy, right? You cannot have happiness just for you and sadness for the other. In that case, I mean, there is a serious mental issue. So it's quite the same in an interview as well. If you get out of that interview room happy, interview hall happy, the possibility is that the interview panel is also quite happy with you, and the chances that you might get a decent mark. And for me personally, in 2016, when I gave my first interview, as far as I remember, my score was somewhere like 160 something, which from what I know is one of the highest in that panel. And in 2017, when finally I cleared the examination, my mark was like 187 or 189 or something like that. So for me personally, interview has been quite good. It has been pretty good experiences for me. They were both pretty good experiences for me. And again, I feel that it ought to be, I mean, it should be a pretty good experience for all of the candidates, provided that they are not very much inclined in digging their own pit. And yes, definitely there might be times when they ask you a question. They might ask you a very factual question. You might be taken aback. For example, I mean, there was this one particular question that was asked to me: what is the net carbon emission of Kerala? I'm basically from Kerala, so they asked me this question, and I was totally taken aback. I didn't know. I was clueless. I said to them, I don't know. And the person who asked me this question, he was quite laughing and telling me in reply, even I don't know. So you see, being candid, being straightforward, it always helps. And particularly to a very, very factual question, you do not have much options there. You cannot take a guess. I mean, yes, definitely there are some questions where you can take a guess. In those instances, those cases, you can ask the permission. You can tell them that, okay, I'm not very sure, but if you permit, I'm willing to take a guess. And in most chances, they will permit you to take that guess. So even if goes wrong, that's completely fine. But on the other hand, if you are totally inclined towards bluffing, well, that might not be very well received by the interview panel. So this is a very, very broad overlook about the interview process.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that, sir. And yes, sir, there is also a question regarding the essay paper in mains, sir. Like how to enhance our writing skills in case of essay paper in our mains.
What is essay basically? Essay is just a big answer. It's exactly like every other GS questions that you are answering, but an average GS paper, an average GS question you are answering in maybe like 400 words or maybe 500 words. But in the case of an essay, that's just a bigger one. That is the only fundamental difference between an essay and a regular answer. But otherwise, if you look at the structure, it is quite the same. It starts with a very proper introduction, then it very organically, it should evolve into the body part, and then finally it should conclude. And how to improve this? I'll say the only way to improve this is by practice. You have to practice writing, because generally when we read or when we talk, what you lack is that the ability to bring those words into the tip of your pen. And that is very important, to have the right word at the right place, to have the right sentence placed at the right instant. That is very, very important. And that too, given the time constraint that you have. So you should be able to give the structure to that essay.
Recording in progress.
Pardon, sir. Pardon. Just that
It's okay.
There wasn't a
No
recording.
problem.
Yes.
So you should be able to structure that essay and then give content to that essay. So generally what I do is that I take like half an hour in the beginning. So 15 minutes, in the first 15 minutes, I give a structure to my first essay. I take a rough page. In the rough page, I draw something like a tree. Introduction, what are the points I should write in the introduction? Okay, then body part, the first point, what are the major aspects of the first point? Second point, what are the major points? So this will be like a tree or a diagram, or like what we used to do in our school is like a flow chart. So you have a clear flow. And once you start writing, then you won't have to think further, because you already have your flow chart ready. You just need to put it into sentences. But otherwise, the problem is that you might get stuck at certain points. You might be in the middle of the body part and you might start thinking, okay, what next? What next? This will just take away all your time. You will not have the continuity. You will not have the flow. Your language will be broken. You will completely be disoriented. And you will end up losing a lot of time and coming up with a very, very bad quality essay. But on the other hand, if your flow is ready, if your flow chart is there for a reference, you know that, okay, this comes after this point. So I should make this point in certain fashion, so that will be very organically linking to my next point. You have that entire thing ready for a reference. And I guess that is very important. So half an hour you can invest for that. And for the remaining part, you will be very, very comfortably able to complete both the essays in the given amount of time. Again, provided that you have practiced a little bit. So it should not be like the first time you are going to write an essay.
Yes.
It's in the exam hall.
Yes, that happens. Like many people don't tend to practice, and then that will be a difficult part of it.
It's
Yes, sir,
very
and to the
important,
next
at least
question.
with respect
So-
to the time
Yes,
management, and at
Yes.
least with respect to the maintaining that flow chart, you should have practiced before. I guess some of the videos are not muted and a lot of noises
Yes.
are coming in the background. Yeah. So
Wait,
yeah,
sir, will let you know, sir. 1 second.
sure, no problem.
Yes, sir. You can continue, sir. Yes, sir. You can continue, sir.
Yeah, so this is what I generally want to say about the essay. The point is that you should practice it so that you can have a broad idea on how to structure your essay, how to manage the time. So these two are very important aspects of writing an essay, and definitely the points. But now that you are anyway preparing for the exam itself, you have all other subjects that you have prepared to help in your essay writing process as well, and the daily newspapers which you are reading and the discussions which you are having with your friends. So all these help in writing a good essay. And one additional thing that you can do is you can put points from your own previous experiences into the essay and make it more personalized as well. So that will give it like a storytelling impact. So all this comes with experience, with practice. So what I suggest is, I mean, don't just think that, okay, it's just essay, I will just do it at the exam hall. Don't think it like that. Instead, practice a little bit, put some effort into essay and make it better.
Yes. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. And there is this interesting question. I mean, like, bit different question. Like, how can disabled persons prepare for the exam, and what are all the changes they may face while they are doing it and as like preparing for a civil service examination?
It depends. It actually depends upon what the issue the person is facing with, right? Because imagine the person is differently able because maybe a particular limb of his is not as functional as others, but in the preparation process that should not hinder that person at all. But but again, I mean, if the trouble that person is facing is because of the eyesight, or is it because of some other problem, so I guess the question should be more specific regarding what exactly is the challenge that person is facing. But otherwise, I mean, a lot of differently able people are also attempting the exam these days, and there are some reservations also for the people who are differently able. That is to enable them, that is to encourage them to come forward, that is to encourage them to leave their hesitations behind, to come forward and to help them take the examinations, and also to ensure that their presence is there in the service as well. So the government has always been very, very proactive in those cases. And even within the service, I mean, the government and the government machineries are always very supportive of the people who are differently able. So if at all anybody who is differently able, who is there in this group with us right now, I will seriously encourage that person. I mean, go ahead, leave your hesitations. I mean, there is nothing that should really stop you from giving a good shot for the examination, and even being a wonderful person, a wonderful civil servant as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that, sir. Hope that would be an inspiration talk for those who think low about themselves in case due to just a physical problem which they face. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. To the next question, sir, how do you read and make notes on current affairs? What are all the other sources other than newspapers for current affairs? Is what you suggest? Like even in internet, there will be some places where you know, sir. So that part of it, can you
Again,
share?
it's quite the same thing which I said in the beginning. The number of the quantum of materials, it is very important that you reduce the quantum of materials, so that you don't just waste your time on reading like 1,000 reports or hundreds of newspapers. No, it doesn't work like that. So for one thing, take one newspaper, stick to that. It can be the Hindu or the Indian Express, or I mean anything, or the Times, or whatever you feel that you are comfortable, whatever gives you a decent coverage of the things around in an unbiased and a humanitarian point of view. The point, I mean, uh, the narrative that it gives can be unbiased. That's fine, but it is not just sufficient that it is unbiased. It should also have a very humane viewpoint. So that is also very important for you to develop a humane mentality, because all the things that you read, all the things that you're reading over a period of time, they will definitely impact you, right? And ultimately, as a civil servant, you are expected to be humane. You are expected to be sympathetic, empathetic. You are expected to be very rational, secular. You are supposed to be very non-sectarian. You are supposed to be non-communal. So a lot of these qualities, the things that you read, they can really help you in framing these kinds of a mentality. So in that extent, the material, the newspaper that you choose, that should also be reflecting these qualities at least to an extent. So choose a newspaper or a material which reflects these qualities. That's one thing. Secondly,
Yes.
you can
Thank
do
you for that.
in
Yes, sir.
addition to the newspaper, you can do a summary study, because I don't know if they still do it, because there used to be this couple of websites which used to give a monthly summary of the news. I forgot the names of these websites, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure that I'm not able to recollect the name of the particular website, but I'm sure that there might be a couple of websites which give you a monthly summary of the news and the events which happened during that month. I guess it would be a good thing, because you are definitely doing a daily newspaper reading and making notes and everything. But in addition, if you can, at the end of the month, if you can summarize the entire thing in a couple of pages, that would be a very good revision. And you can even revise these materials maybe a couple of days before the examination as well. So that might also help you. So choose any of these materials which are available online, which are free. You will not even have to spend anything for that. So you can choose any of these online materials which provide these monthly summary of the news. So go for that. That's also what I'll suggest. But other than that, again, like I say, you have very limited time. Don't go for too many materials. I know people who used to buy all those magazines. What were the magazines? There used to be a couple of magazines also. Like every aspirant used to go for this. But the problem is that at the end of the day, they will have a pile of these magazines which they may not have even opened. So effectively, you are just shelling out a lot of money, and you are getting tense. Every time you look at the pile, you get nervous. Oh my God, I have all these books, I have never read it. So don't get into these kinds of crowd mentality, because this generally happens. Okay, all my friends are also buying this, so I should also. No, don't go for that. Think really rationally. Do you have time? And most of the times, I mean, these magazines might be available in any of the libraries nearby. So you can just, I mean, if you want one or two important articles from those magazines, you can just go and take the notes from that library. You don't have to buy it. And you be very specific, be very selective. So that is what I can suggest.
Thank you for that, sir. And to the most asked question for the evening, this should be like, I think you have already mentioned about it, but still people want to know, what do you specify, like, what do you prefer, coaching or self-study, sir?
Okay, I've just got a message also in the same line. What is your advice for self-preparing aspirants who are unable to go to coaching classes and preparing without guidance? Can they crack the examination without any guidance? Perfectly fine. Like I said, in my case, I mean, I did not have any fixed coaching or anything. I went for like 4 months in the Kerala State Civil Service Academy just to get an overview of the preparation. And after that, I was completely on my own. My preparations, my studies, my discussions, all these, it was all completely managed by my own. So what is the advantage that a coaching center can give you? In my opinion, it gives you only one advantage. In fact, two advantages. One, for somebody who is completely fresh, it gives you a summary of the whole preparation process, right? The second advantage is that you get a lot of peer groups there. The peer groups, in my opinion, is important, because see, the UPSC syllabus, if you see, it is a very vast syllabus. It's not something that, okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to study it all on myself. No, it doesn't happen like that. A good portion of that It comes via discussion. You may not have enough time to study everything. It's exactly like how we used to do the combined study for our examinations in college. You may study some part, your friends might study some other part, and at 5 minutes before the examination, you will do a combined study and you will get some part of it. He will get some part of what you have done. So that is very much applicable in the case of UPSC also, because the syllabus is so much vast. So in that case, it is very important that you have a peer group. So if you can have a peer group even without these coaching classes, that is very fine. And nowadays there are even these libraries. The libraries, they are not, there is no class or anything, but they just give you a sitting space, a reading space, a discussion space. So even in such spaces, you can find your peer group, or you can even find this peer group online. So if you can have a peer group, that will take care of most of the worries. And if your peer group has somebody who has already gone through this examination process, who has already given like 1 or 2 attempts in the examination, they can give an idea to the freshers also. So if you have a peer group, that takes away the necessity for having a coaching class. Okay, so this is my personal take on, do you need a coaching class or can you do it on your own? Definitely you can do it on your own. It would help a little bit more if you have a good peer group who can share your burden, who can tell you not to worry, even if sometimes there are times when we all get a bit worried. There are times when someday we feel that, okay, my studies are not really going well. Yesterday also I couldn't study much. Day before yesterday also I didn't study much. Today also I'm not in a very good mood to study. So there should be somebody to tell, it's okay, chill. I mean, I was also like this last week, but this week I am better. So next week you will be fine. So there should be somebody to tell us like that. And for that, friends are very important. I mean, your family may always have supported you, but they don't know what you are going through, the kind of preparation that you are going through, the vastness of the syllabus, the depth that is expected out of you to be acquired. So none of these things, I mean, your family doesn't know these things, and hence they may not be able to advise you exactly. So that is why it is important to have peer group. Okay. So this is my suggestion with respect to the coaching classes versus individual preparation.
And yeah, 1 second, sir. Sorry to interrupt. Like, participants, we are requested you to like just wait. We have a set of questions to ask. After that finish, we'll let you to ask questions. So kindly hold on with your questions. We'll just finish the set of questions which we already have. Yes, sir. So to my next question, sir. And
Yeah.
this is a question like maybe quite from your experience, sir. Tell us about diplomatic immunity and how diplomats are secured in an unsafe environment.
See, diplomatic immunity is basically, I mean, it goes as per Vienna Convention and everything. That is the safety of the diplomat. So even if by any chance you are getting involved in something which is considered as a crime in that country, yes, you will just be deported. So that is regarding the diplomatic immunity. Basically, a lot of things, I mean, you are quite immune from the regular the law and order procedures of that country. And the purpose of this is many a times, I mean, diplomats might have to be placed in unfriendly or not so friendly countries as well. And the only way they can work comfortably, only way they can work confidently is when they are ensured that they will be safe. And for this, diplomatic immunity is a necessity. What was the second question? The diplomatic immunity and
How diplomats are secured in an unsafe environment.
yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. Basically, in an unfriendly environment, also it is the diplomatic immunity or the idea of Vienna Convention. Because see, imagine you are in a not so friendly country, but the diplomats of that country is there in your country also. So it is a very mutual thing. I mean, the diplomatic immunity that I get in a country is reciprocated for the diplomats of that country in India as well. So that is why, in general, almost every country, even the most hostile countries, they they respect the diplomatic immunity. So for example, when an Indian diplomat goes to Pakistan or China, in all these places, I mean, the diplomat will be secured because there is an added responsibility on the host country to make sure that the diplomat is secure. So that is why, in general, you will find very, very, very little instances, very, very few instances from the entire history itself where a diplomat's life got compromised. And even recently, when it completely goes out of control, because recently you might have heard what happened in Afghanistan, like in Kandahar, we had to evacuate our personals from that place because there was no government at all, and Taliban was making rapid expansion. So at that point of time, we immediately did an evacuation. So yes, that is how you are secured, because largely your security is the responsibility of your country, and as much as it is of your country, it is the responsibility of the host country as well.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that, sir. And to a question a bit back regarding the prep part of it, there is a question. So there has been situation for a lot of people. Even you mentioned, sir, there was a place where you were not able to qualify. Like you had an attempt and then you qualified.
Yes.
So how was that period in between those attempts, and how were you able to handle those stress, mental stress,
It's
and
simple
especially it is
because
currently the sorry, sir.
I mean, with the UPSC, the problem is that the entire preparation takes like an year. So by the time your interview, I mean, by the time it's the time for interview, you are already applying for the next year's examination, and you are starting with your next year's prelims examination. So you do not have that kind of a time gap. Like generally what happens is that, I mean, you get your result, you completely get exhausted, you are sad, you are completely down, you are dejected, disappointed, and then you really start thinking, should I continue this, should I just leave it and go back to my previous corporate? But with respect to UPSC, you do not have that time. You do not have that time to be disappointed, because the day that I mean, particularly in my case, I got the result of the final thing, and I don't exactly remember the month or anything, but just 1 month from that point, it was next prelims. So I barely have like 1 month. So I was sad maybe for one night. That's it. The next day morning, I was okay, back to preparation. So the easiest way that you can completely handle a grief or a sadness that comes from missing a selection is go into the next stage immediately, because engage your mind in an active process, and that is the easiest way you can take away your sadness. And to it, I should add just one more point, which I feel is very, very important. In fact, it is one of the most important thing which I used to suggest to all my students when I'm taking the sessions previously as well. To have a workout. I mean, to have a routine for workout. It can be gym, it can be sports, it can be dance, it can be anything. But you must have a workout as an integral part of your preparation process itself. It should be a part of your daily life. It should be as important as your eating, your sleeping. You should have a fixed time for your workout, because that time that you are using, that you are spending for your workout, that is the best de-stressing mechanism which you can ever have. Nothing will help you better than a good workout. You hit the gym, or you go have some sports, have some badminton sessions or some football sessions. I mean, that 1 hour, that 1.5 hours, you will have no tensions, no worries. You'll be completely fine. And at the end of that session, you'll be completely rejuvenated. That's why even physiologically we say the workouts, they're really helping in creating what we call as happiness hormones, dopamines and all those things. So they really elevate our adrenaline level, our happiness hormones level, and they really help us come back to preparation, concentrate. They will take away all our stress. They will make us feel energetic, which is very, very important. So I will seriously suggest every aspirant here to make sure that your preparation process consists of at least an hour of workout every day. At least an hour of workout. So this is as important as your preparation itself. So, and this
Thank
is
you
the
for that,
easiest
sir.
way you
Yeah.
can make sure that your stress level is not increasing.
Yes, sir. And to a question on your profession, sir, there is this general misconception, or maybe a trend towards whoever writing an UPSC examination, they prefer IPS and IAS over IFS. So, what do you think is the reason for that part of it, sir?
I'm sure that everybody who is present here are very well aware of the reason behind as well. It is basically power. It's basically the power and the glamour that we are seeing in the movie screens, in the newspapers, sometimes in the yellow papers, sometimes in serials. So all these things, otherwise, how many of us actually know the responsibility of a IAS official? How many of us actually know the responsibility of an IPS official? How many of us effectively know the responsibility of an IFS official? None of us know, but still none of us, I mean, all of us make this mind depending upon, okay, it's glamorous. So this is the idea which is driving us, right? And this idea is primarily coming from the movies, the silver screens, the many screens, your serials and newspapers and everything. So which is completely different. I mean, you go to the ground and the reality is like totally different. You might have Salman Khan or Akshay Kumar having some stunt scenes and punching the villains and creating a hole in their intestine. But that doesn't happen in the real life. I mean, you might see these people in the silver screen. They'll be having huge dialogues against the MPs and MLAs, and they'll be trashing these MPs and sometimes even the ministers. Do you think that these things can really happen in the real life? Impossible. So a good part of our thoughts and even our preparation process and even the way in which we are allocating our preferences of service is largely based on these fascinating movies and great scenes on screen, and not really based upon the reality. So what I suggest is, I mean, before giving this the order of our priority, talk with somebody in the service, or at least try to get a basic idea on the service itself. Try to garner more information about these services and average out the kind of approximate kind of responsibilities in these services, the working conditions, the living conditions. So you are at least taking a very informed decision, because right now the decision is highly uninformed, and not just uninformed, it is biased. It is biased because of these stories. So take away that part, and if you are a serious, very very serious aspirant, what I suggest is you try to get a proper information on different services and all the characteristic features of that service.
Thank you, sir. That was an interesting explanation, sir. We all loved that part of it, sir. And yes, sir, to the next question. So, sir, what is the role of an IFS officer in the United Nations organization, sir?
See, we have a lot of
Yes,
international
sir.
organizations, and India needs representation in these organizations. So ultimately, most of the representatives of or the officials, Indian officials in these organizations, they are from the foreign service. So it's exactly like how we have the missions of India in various countries. We have our missions in United Nations as well to take care of our needs, our demands, our aspirations, and sometimes not just ours, because we might be representing multiple countries from the region also. So in many times, I mean, for example, very recently, the Secretary General of the United Nations got elected, and it was the candidate from Maldives who succeeded in that. So we were campaigning for even for the Maldivian candidate, because we were supporting the Maldivian candidate and the missions of India. We were actively giving our support, and we were requesting our host countries also to support the Maldivian candidature. So many times, that's why I said, I mean, we as a country, because we are one of the largest, and most powerful democracies in this world. I mean, we are the largest and one of the most powerful democracies in the world. So we extend our help and our support for a lot of causes which we feel is close to our heart, which we feel is close to the principled stance that we are taking. It may be in the region that we are placed, and sometimes it might even be in the region outside Asian region. But it is based on the principal stance, it is based upon the value systems, it is based upon the bilateral relations. So for all these, we need a proper mechanism to represent India in the multilateral fora as well. And that includes various arms of UN, that includes various other organizations like for trade, for example, like WTO and other organizations as well. So for all these, the foreign service officials, they play they play the most crucial important role. Sometimes you might have specified or specialized people from other domains. For example, in WTO, you might have people from the trade service, you might have people from the economic service, but wherever otherwise, a negotiation process comes in. Generally, foreign service officials come in handy because that's what we do. We represent our country in various other platforms. We negotiate. We try to have a diplomatic solution for most of the problems. And generally, and not just with respect to India, globally, where diplomacy fails, that is when the military comes into picture. So we try to make sure that our military are kept safe. Our military personnel are kept safe, secure in their home with their families.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that, sir. And some people are curious about your work routine, sir. Like many won't know what is an actual life of an IFS officer. What all will he be doing in a daily part of it or whatever? Like, could you explain us about on your work routine, sir?
Okay, now I'll give something very broadly in a way. Imagine imagine you need your country to be represented in another country. What are the different domains you can think about? I mean, definitely there is a political domain. That is because you might have a lot of national interest. The political domain again consists of various bilateral things: defense, the political relations between the two countries, the exchange of information, the visits, the high-level visits. All these things are coming from the political domain. So that is why generally political domain is considered as the bread and butter of diplomacy. And then there is the commercial domain, because as an embassy, we facilitate the commercial relations between the countries and between the private entrepreneurs as well. So we facilitate trade, commerce for Indian companies to come here and the companies from other countries to go to India. So we facilitate both these. And then there is the consular part. Consular part takes care of the visa, passport, and all those things. And sometimes there is a defense wing. Defense wing takes care, or defense wing comes into picture when there is an active defense cooperation between the two countries. In addition, there is a cultural wing. Cultural wing basically is the soft power diplomacy of India, and we showcase the Indian culture. We try to extend the presence of Indian culture in various platforms in the host country. So roughly speaking, these are the various elements that are the various responsibilities or the various domains in which a diplomat engage himself or herself. And this is not just with respect to India. This is the same for every other country as well. So the embassies of other countries which are present in India, they also work approximately in a very similar fashion, because for them also you will have all these wings. There will be a political, there will be a commercial wing, there will be a defense wing, there will be a consular wing, and there will be a cultural. So this is how it works in general.
So thank you for that broad view, sir. Many I wouldn't like. It will be the first time many people are hearing how actually an IFS work will be. So thank you for that, sir. And
It's a very very broad viewpoint which I'm giving. It's a very broad one.
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And sir, to the few questions which to the last few questions which I have jotted out. Next we'll go to the audience, like participants questions. And sir, this is regarding the exams. So do you suggest any specific degree like as a for will be helpful for the exams?
No.
Okay,
because
and
again the thing is
yes,
that
sorry.
imagine you are having, for example, imagine you have a degree in history. History is just one paper, and again maybe you might take history as an optional also, but the history as an optional paper might be quite different from the history that you have learned at the bachelor's level. The same is the case of every other subject. You might have a bachelor's degree in economics, but economics is just one of the subjects that you are preparing for UPSC. So in general, for the entire UPSC preparation itself, how much important is your economics degree? Very less. So yes, in certain subjects, the degree that you might have might come handy, but in general, that nullifies it. It doesn't matter what degree that you have taken. Take whatever degree that you want to study. That's it, simple. Because like I said, I mean, education should not be with a viewpoint for a certain end. The education is an end in itself. So study whatever you like, and then if you feel that okay, UPSC, I am really liking, or I'm developing a liking towards UPSC, then give a preparation for the UPSC. Study all the new subjects that you can, and maybe in the process you might even like a couple of totally new subjects. You might even feel that okay, I'm not going for UPSC anymore, I'm going to specialize in these subjects. So tomorrow you might become a philosopher, tomorrow you might become a psychologist, or tomorrow you might become economist, who knows. So UPSC gives you that kind of an opportunity.
Thank you for that, sir. And these are all the few questions which are from our members of board of Quiz Club of PSGKS. So one of our our past president is an great enthusiast in current affairs, and he's also planning to give his UPSC exam. So his question to you is that who was your role model for getting an inspiration to join IFS or as civil service in general?
I have absolutely no role models basically, because the first time I had a personal interaction or a very personal interaction with anybody who is in service is after getting into the service. Until I got into the service, I never had any personal interaction with anybody from the service. But yeah, officially or formally, I had certain interactions, and that too particularly when I was working in the corporates. And because my domain is aerospace, I was also involved in a lot of defense and aerospace projects. So automatically, I mean, we were also having some of the joint ventures with foreign companies and countries. So in such instances, the government is also involved in that, and that is my official interaction. That was the source of my official interactions with the people from bureaucracy, from foreign service, from trade service, etc. So otherwise, I mean, I never had any personal interactions with anybody in the service before getting into the service, and hence I never had a role model as well.
Yes, sir. And this is to the last question which has been jotted out, and this comes from the person who interacted with you, Anup Das,
Okay.
our head of digital affairs. So his question is that as of now, India doesn't have any dedicated government channel in an international level to spread its propagandas, whereas almost all other nation has it. China has Global Times, Britain BBC, etc. How important is such a channel for India, and how impactful will propaganda war will be in future? I mean, psychological warfare.
Okay. So the first question which I would really want to ask is, I mean, why do you need a propaganda? Because a propaganda, I mean, if you really look at the idea of propaganda, hello?
Yes, sir. You're audible. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So if you actually look at the idea of if you look at the idea of propaganda itself, is it a positive thing or a negative thing? A propaganda is always So I mean, it always it has a very negative connotation. A propaganda is something that you yourself know is not, this is not really true, but I just want to show it off. It's a propaganda. It may be very, very far from the truth. And every issue with the propaganda is that, okay, today you might be successful with your propaganda, but tomorrow that propaganda will get exposed. You cannot deny the fact that the people are intelligent. People are intelligent on the other side as well. People are intelligent everywhere. I mean, so generally, if you push forward a propaganda, at some point it will just backfire. It will be very counterproductive. So instead of pushing a propaganda, what you can push is, that's why I said the relevance of soft power in between. A propaganda is always a very negative thing, but on the other hand, when you are posing a win-win scenario, a propaganda is like a win-win scenario, but I win, I only win. This is the idea of a propaganda. But instead, you can go for a proper win-win situation, I win, you win situation. That's one. Secondly, yes, definitely there might be scenarios when some countries or some organizations might be pushing a propaganda war against India. I guess that's what actually Anu meant. For example, right now, Pakistan does this very often on Kashmir. Pakistan says on the human rights violations in Kashmir. Pakistan says on India's annexure of Kashmir. But these are propaganda wars. When Pakistan does this in other countries, in Pakistan, in social media, yes, this is a propaganda war which they are launching against India. But in almost all the international fora, in almost all the countries, the foreign countries, we give them the reality. We give them the reality of the development that has happened in Indian occupied Kashmir, or Indian Kashmir, or our Kashmir, or the Kashmir which is, which was, which is, and which will be ours, versus the Pakistan occupied Kashmir. See the kind of the stark difference in the development, the opportunities that the people have, the kind of freedom there is with respect to with respect to religion, be that with respect to religion, be that with respect to the education, be that with respect to the livelihood, be that with respect to their development of a sustainable development opportunities. So in all these platforms, if you compare the kind of opportunities and platforms, it's starkly different. So the moment you give this reality to the country, the moment you give this reality to the international forum, the propaganda that is put forward by the entities which are putting forward these things, that's broken, be that Pakistan, be that any other organizations, like even some countries like Turkey, which has been very often, which have been provocative very often. But even right now, what has Turkey done? So Turkey has actually violated the UNSC in Cyprus. So the moment we ask this question to them, they go silent. They tell about India's Indian incursion in Kashmir, which is legal, which is completely India's internal matter, but they say it is not. On the other hand, when we ask them a question which is completely an external matter to them, which is against the UNSC resolutions, they go silent. So that is why if you're trying forward to put a propaganda, there is always a possibility for it to backfire. But on the other hand, when you are dealing in a very transparent fashion, you really need not go for a propaganda war. So that is why I believe that the propagandas are not really necessary. Yes, maybe for a short period of time, you might be able to polarize people. For a short time, you might be able to win certain votes. For a short time, you might be able to win some support, but for a short period of time. Because tomorrow, when your propaganda gets exposed, you will not have anywhere to hide. You will not have anywhere to run and hide behind. But on the other hand, what we really need is more opportunities and more avenues to showcase our soft power in terms of development, soft power in terms of culture, soft power in terms of joint development, joint financial programs, joint sustainability programs, join programs for environmental sustainability in all these platforms. What we need is a win-win scenario where it's like I win, you win kind of scenario, which is very important. And that in those terms, I guess I feel that India is doing quite a good job, because right now, if you see uh, the the missions across the world, I mean, generally we have a cultural center associated with the embassy itself. The cultural center is very proactive in general when it comes to things like yoga or education in India. So for all these things, and there is a considerable number of foreign students who are coming to India for education, and there is a considerable number of countries who are very much supportive of our yoga and holistic lifestyle programs. So in these things, I feel that what we are doing is a much better job than just going for a propaganda machinery system. But again, at certain levels, for certain very specific interest, we may also engage in a propaganda war. But that will be like a counter mechanism. It is not just for our propaganda thing, because we need not go for a propaganda. We have stuffs in our hand. When you have stuffs in your hand, why do you want to bluff? It's like that. But sometimes we have to do a counter propaganda mechanism. It's exactly like how we do what we call as radicalization and a counter radicalization. So exactly how you have this counter radicalization programs, the counter propaganda programs are also necessary. So that, yes, that we do engage in, but generally we try to stay away from a propaganda mechanism. So Anup, I hope that your question is clarified.
Yes, sir. Next, I think we can move on to the participants' question. So, participants, you can kindly type your questions on the chat box, and sir can answer to you directly.
I guess the question regarding coaching and preparing without guidance has been addressed. Tell me about compulsory foreign language exams, sir. No, don't worry about the compulsory foreign language now. You have a long list of other examinations to go before the compulsory foreign language exam. So first, I suggest that you concentrate into the UPSC, then clear it, and then you choose a compulsory foreign language, because I mean, I chose Arabic. That's why I'm here. So a lot of my friends, each year you have a different list of compulsory foreign languages. So some years you will be having Sinhalese, some years you will be having uh, Vietnamese. A lot of languages are there in the list. So you choose one from the list. That's how it goes. What should a fresher do? What helps him to kickstart, and how can he overcome inferiority complex or being introverted? To kickstart, you don't have to kickstart, in my opinion. It's a slow and steady beginning. What I suggest is, generally, to anybody who is totally new to the UPSC exam preparation, what I suggest is start with the NCERT textbooks, because these textbooks, they are not very difficult, they are not very complicated. They start at a very basic level, and then they build their blocks to higher levels. So start with the NCERT textbooks, maybe from the 7th standard. That is when the history etc. comes into picture, when geography so slowly starts getting more technical. Start their preparation from, and it would be a very gradual process. So you don't have to really kickstart it, but make sure that your start is sustained. Make sure that your start is steady and sustainable. And regarding the inferiority complex, being introvert, this is where, again, having a peer group really helps. Because with the peer group, you'll be having a very regular discussions, engagement, debates, and all these things will be there as a part of peer group. In addition, once you're getting to the interview stage, your peer group can help you with a daily mock interview sessions. They can be like 5 or 6 crew, 5 or 6 friends in the group, and they can constitute the panel, and they can ask you n number of questions. So every day you will be having kind of mock interview, so that your hesitation in speaking, your hesitation in expressing yourself, all these worries can be taken care. So that is why, again, I suggest that the peer groups are very important. Okay, so this question is from Manu. I hope that helped, Manu. And from Harshvardhan, how to approach each subject while studying, how to approach question while writing, how to give an answer according to that. What do you mean? It's exactly like, I don't know, Harshvardhini. I don't really understand your question, dear.
Sir, in the mean, I'm asking how to while reading
Okay.
while reading.
What
But
class are you
how to
studying,
approach the
Harshvardhani?
Sir, I'm studying second year, sir, second year of BSc Mathematics.
BSc Mathematics. So the answer to this question is exactly how you have been preparing until now, Harshvardhani. For example, you are studying mathematics, right? So your question is on solving a problem based on a theory, based on theorem A, right? So you do not answer that based on theorem B. So your answer is very much in tandem with the question. It is exactly the same with UPSC also. So that is why it is very, very important that you understand the question. You should be very careful about the keywords of the question. So the moment you get a question, identify the kind of question, identify the keywords of the question, because I'll give you a small example. Some of the questions will be like discuss ABC. The next, imagine another question, critically evaluate ABC. Do you think that there is a difference between these two things? If you don't think that there is no difference, then you will have to reconsider yourself, because discussion and critically evaluating something, they are two different things. When you are asking to be when you are being asked to discuss ABC, you just write something about ABC, you give a brief idea on ABC. But the moment you start critically evaluating ABC, it is like, okay, what are the advantages of ABC, what are the disadvantages of ABC? And finally you should tell that, okay, the advantages of ABC seems to be more important than the disadvantages, and I am of the opinion that, so XYZ, whatever it be. So a critical evaluation is a totally different keyword from the other keyword discuss. So you should be able to identify the keyword of the question. You should be able to identify the keyword of the question and what was the mentality, or what is the kind of answer that is expected out of you by the person who is setting that question. That is very, very important. And that comes with preparation, that comes with practice. So once you are in the preparation process, once you are done with the prelims examination, and when you start preparing for the mains, when you start writing the answers and preparing for the mains, you will start realizing, when you do the mock exams, when you do the mock mains papers, you will start realizing that, okay, there is considerable number of difference, there are considerable number of differences, and hence that approach slowly evolves over a period of time. Does that make it clear, Harshvardhani?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So handling corruption as a civil servant, how to handle and get through them. Why do you want to even think about handling corruption? How do you handle corruption as an individual? You
Good
stay
evening,
out
sir.
of
So this is Ashwini Priya. Ashwini Priya.
Okay.
It's cadet Ashwini Priya.
Okay.
Sir, good evening, sir. I always wondered, India, in every aspect of India, there is a corruption. There is a point of thing. It has become in such a way that instead of the officers asking for corruption, the civilians here are in a mindset that if we are able to give corruption, only the things get moved. So how could we change the aspect of the things in the minds of civilians to get over the thing of corruption?
Okay, your question is basically from a larger society point of view. The easiest way is to digitalize the things. The moment when you are digitalizing the thing, the moment you are giving a digital solution to things, a lot of corruption will automatically go down, because you don't even have to go to the office, you don't even have to see the person, you don't even have to give anything. Everything happens online, everything happens digitally. You submit a request, you put a request, it goes to the concerned person. If it doesn't get resolved in XYZ amount of time, automatically a ticket gets created and there will be an inquiry on that. There will be a higher authority automatically intimated that this has been there with this person for like XYZ amount of time, but it is not yet resolved. So the higher authorities will automatically get intimated. So with that kind of a machinery, it's rapidly coming in many states in India in different platforms. Imagine yourself, previously for every small thing we had to go to a village office or to a corporation to get all the certificates, but now a lot of things are getting online, right? So that is a right step for the society to get rid of the menace of corruption. And secondly, as education, as civil awareness comes into picture, that is, the people should know that giving money is not a part of the system. It is just something that is very, what can I say, it's an aberration. But now what the problem has become that if an official or if anybody in the government, if he's not corrupt, people clap. Why is that? Because we generally clap when something is extraordinary. The society has started believing that not being corrupt is extraordinary. But on the other hand, being corrupt is extraordinary. It should be extraordinary, but extraordinary on the negative side. So that mentality will slowly come. That mentality should come slowly with education, with awareness creation programs, with digitalization, with the mass media evolvement, with definitely the youngsters coming into the picture. When the youngsters like you and every other person who is present here, when they are able to tell to our parents and to others in the society who are a bit elderly, if we are able to tell them that, okay, I mean, corruption, it's an issue. You don't have to pay money to anybody, and if somebody doesn't do anything without money, you can tweet it, you can put it in Facebook, you can tell that this and this official has done this and this, you can tag higher officials, you can send an email to the concerned official, you have the grievance redressal mechanisms now. So many times corruption is still happening because people don't know about these alternative mechanisms. So that is why education and awareness creation programs also becomes very, very important. I hope I
Thank you
have
so
given
much,
a
sir.
very small
Yes, sir.
idea to you, dear.
So it was
Okay.
brief and very informative, sir. Thank you so much for your explanation, sir.
Thank you. How can one do answer writing practice for mains in a self-study, as there isn't anyone to check our answers? And how did you practice for answer writing, sir? For checking the answers, I will seriously suggest that there should be somebody else. Either it should be a peer group kind of thing, or you can just join the exams conducted by any of the academies, any of the decent academies. You'll get a lot of them online. Some of them even conduct online examinations. You can just write, you can scan it, and you can send it. They will evaluate and send you back. So a lot of such mechanisms are there. So if you don't get your answers evaluated, how do we know that you are in the right process? How do you know that your answers were really to the point? It's really difficult, right? So I seriously suggest that, I mean, you get your answers evaluated. So that's my opinion. That's from Shalik Ahmad. And you have...
Sir, pardon to... Hello.
Yes.
Hello, sir. Pardon to interfere. Like, I think it's time. So can we just limit it to 3 to 4 questions at the last? Like, so
yeah.
Just like a lot of time. So I feel
just let me think. What would be the pattern of preparation? Pattern of preparation I have already talked. Guys, don't... Okay. I'm a person mentioned. I'm especially concerned with physical aspects of training. Physical aspects of training, again, don't worry. For example, in foreign service, I never had any physical training per se. So don't even bother about the physical aspects of training. You'll have physical aspects of training only in police service, railway police service, etc. So it's very, very selected few services. Otherwise, you can completely avoid it. How did you study for the exam when there is no motivation, sir? That's why I again said your peer group should be there. The peer group should be able to motivate you. Sometimes when you feel low, your peer group should be able to push you. Sometimes you will be doing that for the others in the peer group. It's a mutually strengthening process. And definitely the workouts, like I said, workouts, they will give you a lot of energy. If I didn't get selected in IAS or IFS interview, can I go for other services? Definitely. I mean, this is a single examination for more than 20 to 24 24 different services. It's a single examination. You are giving your priority. My first priority is IFS, second priority is IPS, third is IAS. So you can give all the priorities, all the services in the priority list. So if you are not clearing the cutoff for the first two, the third one will come into picture. Simple. That's it. So I guess we are done with all the questions. Yes.
I have one more question. Sir, you have told that you have lost in your first attempt, and in addition to that, while starting a preparation, you have done one or two mistakes in that. What would you suggest for me that I would not repeat such mistakes in my preparations?
I mean, if I should say what you should not repeat, I should know what is the mistake that you are presently doing, right? So what you are repeating is a very specific to you. It's a very specific thing to you. So you have to identify the thing that you are making a mistake with. For me, my mistake was I never devoted much time. I didn't have enough time because I was doing my work as well in 2015. That's my first attempt. That's why I had to resign. That was my rectification of the mistake. So identify where you are going wrong and try to avoid that particular point.
Okay, thank you.
So do we have any further questions? I guess that's...
Sir,
Hello.
can you just mention the list of books for UPSC other than NCERT, sir?
My dear, I would, it's a completely personal choice of the books. Like I said, I mean, I gave you a simple example, how even for one particular book, for example, in modern history, there were people who went for different authors. So few of them went for Ramachandra Guha, few went for India after Gandhi. I mean, a lot of different options are coming into the picture. I mean, I cannot even recall the name of the books right now because I have been completely out of touch with those specific books. But you can pick and choose the books. Just go for the authors, see the quality of the authors, make sure that the content is more or less covering the UPSC syllabus. That's all. And these things you will be finding it online itself. You can have a few, dedicate some time for identifying the right kind of materials. So don't just jump into the books. Instead, take some time, identify the books, make the set of your books, make it synchronized with the syllabus. So that is how you start with it. Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
What strategy can we employ to?
We can come.
Yeah.
Sir, there are a lot of repeated questions which are coming, sir. So I feel better we can conclude, sir.
Yes, I think so.
With the part of... Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So over to Srinivasan, our club's secretary, to give a thank you speech to our guest.
I was just impressed by your patience, sir, and the way you brief every answer. You just listen every answers carefully. I mean, every questions carefully and give a brief answers to everyone. And you just act very patiently and very calm and cool, composed, sir. I'm just impressed by your attitude, sir. As a
Thank you,
personal,
Srinivas.
Yeah, sir. And first of all, I would like to thank our beloved guest of this webinar, Mr. Satish Balakrishnan, sir, IFS office, sir, for accepting our cordial invite of this club of guests for this webinar, sir. I also like to mention some points here. Our beloved guest was more eager than us. Actually, he was more eager than our board members to interact with you people, the participants. And he said to arrange it as an interactive session webinar. And so that the participants will get more experience and he thought of sharing his valuable knowledge and experience to participants in a very easy manner when it becomes an interactive session. Thank you, sir, for it. And I also like to thank our participants, beloved participants. Without them, this webinar wouldn't be possible. Thanks for attending the webinar and patiently hearing all these things and asking the useful questions. Last but not least, I like to thank our organizer board, especially our digital head of digital affairs, Mr. Anup Das, for contacting you and asking permissions and lots of procedure for this webinar with all the board members. And I also like to thank our teacher coordinator Priya ma'am and our beloved management and the principal for providing the necessities. Thank you all. Thank you folks for participation. Thank you, sir.
It's a pleasure having this opportunity to interact with all you guys, and I hope I was able to answer most of your queries in a decent fashion, in a quite satisfactory manner. And like I said, I mean, this is a very, very, very unique and very individual journey that we all have to take. So I may not be able to exactly give an answer to your specific query, because that has to be identified, because the answer to those query will have to be identified by yourself. I have only shared a glimpse of what I went through at that point of time, or a very general outlook on how you can approach your question or your query which is bothering you. So try to go further into that, and I'm hopeful that you will all find your own answers, and I'm hopeful that you will all find your own success as well. It may not be completely, I mean, with civil service only, it could be with anything, but whatever it be, I'm sure that if you are having a commitment preparation in UPSC, that might help in whatever domain that you are choosing to be in. So I wish you all the best, and have a wonderful time, wonderful career, and wonderful college life as well. Because I mean, what's life if you don't enjoy it? And college is the best place to enjoy it. So have fun, enjoy, take care.
Thank you, sir. Your words are such a great one.
So bye, guys. I shall take my.
I'll just. Yes, pardon, sir. I just wanted to inform the participants about something. So, participants, we have updated an Google Forms in the chat box. Kindly fill up your details. This will be the form which will provide you with your e-certificates for this webinar. So, kindly do fill up with this form. And if you don't fill up with this form, we may not be able to get you a certificate. So, I request all the participants who are there here in this meet to fill up the forms and forward it to the people who are there watching through YouTube stream to fill up the forms. And yes, guys, thank you. And yes, sir, thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys,
that's
and
that's
bye-bye.
what I wanted to inform, sir.
Bye, sir.